For more on U.S. President's visit to the UK, I spoke with Duncan Edwards. Now, Duncan is the Chief Executive Officer at transatlantic trade organization British American Business. We began by talking about the ongoing protests against President Trump's visit.
Well, I think it's normal in any developed democracy to see protests, and I think that's actually the minor side of this story. I think the much more important side is that the visit has taken place. Frankly, it's long overdue for the president to be in the UK, the home of its strongest and most important ally, and I'm just delighted that it's happened.
So President Trump is now saying that the United States and the UK relationship is the highest level of special, and that's a quote. This comes after he said that Theresa May's Brexit plan would actually kill any kind of agreement. How much confidence do you have in them reaching a deal?
Well, I think both of those statements might end up being true. I mean, I think that the relationship is incredibly important, and it was good to hear the president reiterate that today. And most importantly, because of the security dimensions of the relationship, which is the cornerstone of the Western alliance. However, I do think it's unlikely that the free trade agreement that the US and the UK have both talked about is going to be able to happen, certainly not in the way that was initially intended, because of the UK's current commitment to be bound to the EU rulebook and regulations for trading goods and food.
What are some of the obstacles that are against this deal?
Well, look, if you in any free trade agreement, both sides need to have the ability to have give and take. It's not just about the financial tariffs that are imposed on each other. It's about the regulations. It's about the standards that are imposed on, or that are expected in the production of goods and food and so on. And if the UK has no freedom to change the current regulations because it's committed to whatever the EU does, then the president's absolutely right in what he said yesterday when he said he would need to negotiate with the EU. We'll wait and see. I mean, the UK position is just the start of a negotiation with the EU, and it may change. We will wait and see.
Do you feel like Theresa May has the domestic support to go ahead with Brexit and push back against President Trump at the same time?
Well, I mean, honestly, it looks like the most painful negotiation possible, and the president hinted at that in the press conference today. I mean, incredibly difficult, trying to do two things which are almost diametrically opposed: satisfy those people in the government who want to maintain close, open borders with the EU, whilst satisfying those who want to see a return of full political sovereignty to the UK. It's almost impossible to get both of these things done. My guess is that it won't happen in that way, and either the UK will remain very closely tied to the EU and therefore not in a position to have a deal with the US, or it will be a hard Brexit and a WTO arrangement with the EU, hopefully a free trade agreement with the EU, and a free trade agreement with the US. I think the halfway house is almost impossible.
So what about the impact on trade across the EU in light of President Trump pushing to use these tariffs against everyone?
Yeah, the tariff question, I'm sure it came up in the discussions today, and clearly the UK, along with most of the allies of the US, have denounced the use of financial tariffs as a weapon, if you like, in the trade disputes. I think that's right, but at the same time, I think that everyone has to look through this policy and try to understand why it is that the US is so unhappy with the current arrangements. I mean, clearly there are problems with the current rules of the WTO, both on the maximum tariffs that the US is allowed to impose, which tend to be lower than its trading rivals, and also on the dispute resolution system, which is clumsy and clunky and doesn't work very well. So I think tariffs are not great, but they do come and go over history. But the root cause of this is an unworkable WTO at the moment.